Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Reflections on Black Mirror, the podcast that takes an episode of Black Mirror and casts reflections on it. Your hosts for this episode are me, Dan.
And Dan, sorry, I thought you were going to say my name. Sorry, and Dan, hello.
Dan and Dan is like a mirror of names. Look at that. I've just worked that out after about 15 episodes.
Well done.
I did stumble again halfway through that intro because again, just thought to
I'm not.
myself, I like
I'm not
this.
sure.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's the same as last week. And what I am impressed at is you don't ever say casting views. Like you must be so used to saying that, and I don't think you've actually done that once yet. So well done.
What should we say? Casting reflections on Black Mirror on a casting views episode. I keep meaning to say. I'm wondering we should say sometimes in the week if there's anything like tech Black Mirror that's ever happened to us during the week, the preceding week. I mean,
Black Mirror.
not not to the extent of the show, obviously, but if there's weird things or anything.
The only weird thing that's happened, I don't think it's Black Mirror, but someone was walking around our office in a Christmas jumper yesterday. Bearing in mind we're now in mid January, that weirded me out a little bit. It's not really Black Mirror, but it's the one thing that happened this week which I felt was a bit weird.
Like in the Cookie World or USS Callister, you're
Yeah,
in a simulation.
yeah. It took me a while to click. It wasn't one of those bright Christmas jumpers. It was, but it definitely had reindeers and snowflakes on it. Yeah, it did confuse me slightly. I thought I'd gone back in time.
So let's get stuck into this episode because we haven't actually spoken about this one by WhatsApp this week because you watched it later than I did, and I've got really mixed views on this one.
We should probably say that you wanted to talk about it, but because
Yeah.
because you kind of text me goes, have you seen Black Mirror? I've got some opinions on it, and I was like, no, not yet. And it goes, oh, that cut the conversation short then. No, I don't think we've spoken. We haven't really had a conversation since.
It
So this
literally
is
did go like that. I think I watched it Sunday, and then
yeah.
I messaged you because you normally watch it quite early. So I messaged you and said, "Have you watched it?" I think this was Monday night, and you said no, and I went, "Brilliant, cuts that short then." But anyway, we're here now talking about it. So it's series 4, episode 4, Hang the DJ, written by Charlie Brooker and directed by Tim Van Patten. And as the rest of season 4, it released on the 29th of December 2017. So I think, again, like a couple of other episodes, I'm only going to name the lead actors in this. We've got Georgina Campbell as Amy and Joe Cole as Frank. Now, it starts off with Frank walking at night. He speaks into a device. You think it's a phone at first, but he speaks into a device and he says, "Coach, where do I go?" And like a computerized voice says, "Proceed to the hub." He walks into a restaurant, sits down at a table, and then you see Amy walk in and she asks her device, "How will I know it's him?" And she sees a picture of a man, which was Frank. So, right at the start, we see it's a dating scenario in a dating app and they're being set up. They meet up, they're extremely awkward together, but in a cute way, and they both mention using a system for the first time. And then, the other odd thing is they haven't ordered food, but the waiter automatically brings over their food choices to them, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. I did clock that at the time, thinking that was interesting.
And the other thing, and again, it kind of then makes sense at the end, he keeps looking around and you see there's a guy standing at the back of the restaurant in a suit, almost like he's a bodyguard or something, but you feel like you're getting a sinister tone to him being there. Anyway, she says to Frank, she goes, "As it's our first time, our first date together, should we check the expiry date?" And so again, they look at their devices and they click on it and they see 12 hours pop up. So I think we could say now, can't we, that we're in a world where if you're using this dating app, at least anyway, this device, you're put into relationships for a certain period of time, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess it's clear at the time you're right. They have been matched by some sort of dating site, and they have been given a time limit of how long that will last.
Yeah. And so for this relationship, they've got 12 hours.
They can't find that out until they both push a button at the same time, can they? So they both have to be present to find them at
Yeah.
times. So it's not like they find out before the date. It's when they get there.
So a vehicle turns up, which is like an electric milk cart. Well, over here anyway in the UK, isn't it? It's like, do you remember the old electric milk carts that would turn up and takes them to a chalet? and they separate and they each ask their device what they need to do next. And the coach tells them it's up to them to decide. They lie on a bed together discussing what dating must have been like before the system, and they hold hands. And we then find out afterwards that they didn't sleep together as they meet outside after the 12 hours and then they go their separate ways.
You're probably about to say it, but I thought this bit was quite interesting, how they spent their 12 hours, because you do wonder if they didn't know what the expiry date was. It kind of, they feel like they're up against the clock, but they also feel like they don't want to have a one night stand. So it feels like, I think they're a little bit conflicted about what is natural in this, because they're both not really one night stand type of people. That's not what they're looking for. So it's a bit of a weird scenario to be in, isn't it? And how to behave.
Yeah, I think what's key here is even though the date was 12 hours, you see quite a bit of them airtime for that date. And yeah, they're awkward. It's probably their first time. It may even be sort of like the first time they've stepped into the dating world, but also they are just really fun together, aren't they? They get
Yeah,
on. There's only a couple of other episodes where it's been like this, but there's no other than that time where he looks round when he sees that man at the back. It's a fun episode, isn't it? They're joking, they're laughing,
yeah.
and they really do get on really well. And like you said, yeah, it's almost like they kind of didn't know what to do, so they split up. And the coach tells them the next day that even a short encounter helps to shape their decisions. So the system is ultimately working towards a pairing day for each member by putting them with matchups. So basically, each relationship is a predetermined set of time, at which point the system learns stuff about them and then works out who the best partner will be for them. And yeah, there's this pairing day, which sounds quite formal, doesn't it? They then split up. You see them going to their next date. Now she ends up with someone she finds she's attracted to and she likes, and he's with someone who basically looks like she can't stand him, right?
Yeah.
Her date is or her relationship is 9 months and his is 12 months or a year. So he's got a year to spend with her. So Amy's date tells her that it's relationship number 5 for him and he's found it best to have sex up front. And he sets his status. So this was the interesting thing. He sets his status on his app machine thing to consent to everything.
Yeah.
It cuts to Amy and her date having sex, and you then cut to Frank with his new partner being a lot more awkward, doesn't it? Like, doesn't she say she wants him to do it from behind because she doesn't want to look at his face or
Yeah,
something,
just
doesn't
that, just that, just the
she?
whole thing is just not attractive, is it? It's not a turn on. It's very much, we're doing this activity because we have to. She can't stand him. He can't stand her. Yeah, it looks horrific.
Yeah, literally going through the motions. So Frank then asks the coach when he can if he can just walk away from the relationship, and he's told no, he can't. So a set amount of time later, we see them meet up at I think it's a pairing date for another couple, and Frank and Amy see each other and they start flirting. Well, I say start flirting with each other, but they get on so well, don't they? They're so matched that straight away they fall back into the joking
Yeah.
and kind of laughing with each other. Cuts back to each other's relationship, and at that point, Amy, while she was attracted to her new date, she's getting more and more annoyed with his mannerisms, isn't she? We see the timer counting down, and they're then both unhappy in their relationship. Frank obviously is already. It's not that he's unhappy in it; it's just that the two, him and his new date, just aren't compatible. So Amy's date ends. She's put into another one straight away for 36 hours. And then basically she ends up having sex with this person straight away because that's what she's kind of learned from the previous one. And we see her being in a continual cycle of, I think, 4 or 5 relationships of 36 hours, where again, she's just sleeping with the date and then the date ends.
But you can tell she's not enjoying this, can you?
Yeah.
She might be doing all these acts, but actually you can tell it's demeaning. It's not what she's looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, she's obviously after a relationship, like a proper one, but she's just been thrown into these 36-hour ones. So we get to see Frank's relationship finally ends, and I found this bit funny. He kind of like goes outside, and he wants to talk to her, and she just walks off, doesn't she? She
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like says, sort of says, "See ya," and walks off. Now this is then the interesting bit. He gets paired up with Amy again, and they meet up in a restaurant, and they agree not to have and not to look at their expiry date. They have sex that evening, and the next day, they start discussing how they think the system works in terms of pairing people together. Anyway, again, we see time pass, and Frank is curious to see how long the relationship is due to last. So he gives in, and as you said earlier, both of them are supposed to do it at the same time. So because he's on his own, he looks at it, and initially it says 5 years. But because he's done it on his own, it recalibrates to take in this almost like distrustfulness, I think, that he's done. It drops to 3 years, down to 18 months, 2 months, 3 weeks, 5 days, and then finally ends up on 20 hours. So from being 5 years, he's now only got 20 hours with Amy. He goes out the next day with Amy, admits what he did. Now, I'm going to say something here, and I know you've got something to pick up on it. Because again, another weird thing, if I'll admit I knew something was going on, but I didn't know exactly what. Here, she's skipping stones across a pond, isn't she? And she keeps saying, "It's 4 every time." She goes, "I've never done it more than 4 times," or something like that, doesn't
Yeah,
she?
she says I've never. She asked him, "Have you ever done it in more or less than four?" Implying that it's always four skips. I think it's at that point you think, "Oh, hang on a minute, something's a bit not right in the world."
Yeah, they have a big argument. The system again tells Frank that it's assessing his reaction to the breakup. This is where the finale kicks in. So I know we sort of summarized this quite quickly, but it is more about some of the conversation we're going to have. Amy gets told she's got a pairing day coming up, and she's allowed to have contact with one previous partner. She chooses Frank.
Can we just back, because I think you've missed one relationship, which I think is actually quite good. Because Frank actually then has a one night stand with another girl, doesn't he? And he has a conversation about Amy the entire time while they're having sex,
Right. Yeah.
and they kind of, and obviously the other girl has obviously been heartbroken as well. And as they're just having a normal conversation while in the act of sex, and they kind of get to the end of it, and Frank goes, "Do you mind if I think about Amy?" And then she goes, "Well, can I think about him as
Yes.
well?" And then they finish. So obviously not over it.
Yeah.
Neither of those two people are over it, and are not right in another relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to remember that one, please, because I know I forget things as we go along. But yeah, yeah, I completely forgot about that. And I kind of almost just love the honestness of both of them in that bit.
Yeah, it was quite good. And she also picked up on a point, didn't she, where she said, "You didn't say sorry once." And I thought that was quite a key line, because even though he felt bad, he never actually apologised for breaking Amy's trust.
I think if I'm right, I think they've actually both got their pairing days. And anyway,
Correct, yeah.
yeah, Amy chooses to meet Frank. She basically says to him that she doesn't want to go through with her pairing days. She wants him. She wants them to be together, don't they? And that they should just ignore what the system is telling them, right? It's here where she starts saying she says, "Haven't you realised that we don't have memories before the system?" Doesn't she? She goes, "We haven't got any memories about before we use the system." And she says to him, she thinks the world is a test and that they have to rebel against it. And this is where now I said the man at the start, when Frank was looking back, he approaches with a taser. Amy touches, she reaches out to the taser, it stops working. The people in the restaurant freeze. Frank and Amy run out of the restaurant. They reach a wall with a big ladder, a singular ladder. They start scaling the wall, and it then the world starts dissolving around them, doesn't it? And then we see multiple versions of them with numbers above their head. And basically, we find out that there's been 1,000 simulated realities constructed around Frank and Amy meeting up in a dating scenario. And in 998 of the simulations, they rebelled the system to be together. Then it cuts to what we then assume is the real world. And we see Amy and Frank in a bar making eye contact for the first time and their match says they're 99.8% successful, or it's a 99.8% successful match, and that's it, the end. So I know I've kind of gone through it quickly there. So in a nutshell, the whole episode was a computer simulation within a dating app where it was running algorithms against the person you select to see if you'd be compatible. So initial thoughts on this?
Where do you want to start? I feel like that's quite. I know you kind of said at the start there's not a whole lot to talk about. Well, I think there's quite a lot. I enjoyed the episode. Let's just talk generally first. I enjoyed the episode. This felt different to a lot of the ones that we've seen before, and it's kind of similar to that nosedive one where it kind of comes away from kind of like the murder and the the bad things happening, whereas this felt more just in a different world. So I really enjoyed it. And the one thing I didn't like about it is when you find out the whole episode is just a pre-date model to get them together. I felt like that could have been done a little bit differently, like maybe it was some sort of couples therapy where they were trying to work out if they were compatible or something along those lines. The fact that it kind of did the whole episode and you find out actually they haven't been on a date in the real world yet, I didn't like that last 10 seconds. I felt that could have been done a lot better.
That is for me where my whole and I'm still jumping between scores in my head, so I'm gonna wait to see what you end up giving it before I give mine. But I'm still, it is that bit that I think makes me not overly like the episode. I wish it actually was a world where you were forced basically not have the twist at the end. I would like it to be a world where they were
Yeah,
forced into the matchups and almost if they were rebelling against it and you just see them running away with maybe people pursuing
yeah.
them. But
If they'd just got out that ladder and came out into the real world
yeah,
and realised they were part of some sort of, I don't know, TV show or online experiment or something along those lines, and then they went off and realised that they were right for each other, then I think that would have been it would have been quite nice if they'd worked out at the end that they were actually going to be matched. They were going to be each other's ultimate match, even though they'd rebelled against it. So yeah, but the last 10 seconds taints it a bit for me because I think it's such a good concept. It feels a bit tainted that it was just a computer algorithm.
and we've said it a lot for a lot of episodes. I think for me, part of that is the two leads are honestly, they're brilliant and they are brilliant together. And like you said, it's so goes against a lot of the episodes where it is just a fun episode, isn't it?
Yeah,
Even where, okay, the bit where she's in relationship after relationship, you can see she's unhappy. But even the one where he's in for the year, there's comedy in that. You know,
yeah,
they do make it laugh because again, it's not that he's overly smitten with her and she's rebuffing him or she's in love with him and he's not. There's some genuinely funny bits between the two of them. So when you see them get on that well, and then like I said, just to find out it's simulation 998 or simulation 1,000 of 1,000. Like I said, for me, the previous 50 minutes lost the impact it had, or and you know where I was thinking, oh, I'm going to ask you about this, and this, and I'm still going to ask you about those, but yeah, it just took it away for me.
yeah, yeah. I agreed. I agree. Yeah, it's just I think we've had a few episodes now where we feel like we could have come up with a better ending. So I don't know if Charlie Brooker's listening, but maybe we could come on board to do the endings for him because there has been a few that have kind of turned in the last few seconds, hasn't there?
I mean, I'm not going to be as critical to you, Charlie, as Dan was. The other Dan, Dan S. Let's get that straight. And I don't want to dwell too much on the ending again here, but like I said, for me, end it where they rebel, end it with them escaping the confines of wherever they are, end it with them genuinely saying that we're not going to be told what we have to do. I guess the element of that is that it's a bloody good dating app because it's run 1,000 simulations and you know they're going to be together because 998 times
But do you
they
know what?
they went against it.
It's so I feel like yeah, it's a good dating algorithm, but you know that dating algorithms in the real world don't work. The way the algorithm works today is how do we get these people to pay more money? Like how do we get them to add to their subscription I
Yeah,
think that's how the algorithm works now, rather than actually trying to match people through some sort of model.
yeah. So let's go back to the episode, the start of the episode, and let's treat it like that bit is real. So what do you think about a scenario where you are put into relationships with people for a
Brilliant.
set amount of time?
So the first thing I wrote down, and I don't know, I can't remember what couple it was. It wasn't Amy and I've forgotten his name, Frank. It wasn't Amy and Frank. It was the next the next guy, who was obviously,
I
he
think he's
wasn't
Lenny.
really
I think he's called
Lenny.
Lenny. Yeah,
Yeah, Lenny. He
yeah,
wasn't in it. Obviously, for him, the whole thing was very transactional. No types of feelings involved. But he said something which really hit home. And he said that, I think they were talking about dating in the old world and how it would have been like. And I guess what they're referring to is what dating apps is like today. I guess that's the stage before this one, isn't it? Is that what we're talking about? And he said the words option paralysis. And I thought, what a brilliant way to describe it, about how people don't make choices because they have option paralysis. And then when I thought about those words a bit more, I thought about that's exactly what watching telly's like, isn't it? It's when you used to have 5 channels, you used to be able to watch something all the way through and focus. But now with Netflix, Amazon, Disney, you spend half an hour scrolling through the menu because you have
yeah,
so much choice. And then
yeah,
sometimes you will start something and you will get fear of missing out, but you've not played the best thing that you could have possibly watched. So you end up not enjoying the thing that you selected. And I thought that term option paralysis is such a good way of describing the dating world today and watching telly. I don't know why watching telly came into it, but
yeah.
it was
Well, no,
it,
no,
it was quite interesting.
no. It's true. You get a lot of options. You get everything thrown at you when you're on an app. I mean, even when you're trying to sign up for something or trying to close an account down, you get a million and one messages pop up. Are you sure you want to do this? We can offer you this, or you can
Yeah,
take out this, and this. There was also at the start, and I think this one was between Amy and Frank. There was an interesting thing where they were talking again about how things were done beforehand. You don't have to decide to break up because they said, imagine
yeah,
how messy that would be, and who's got to make the first move with that. And it's almost like you can see where this works in this world because should you not? I guess there's two sides of the coin, right? If you're with someone and you don't get on, like he was for a year, 12 months you're not going to be in that. But like they were at the start for what was it, 36 hours? They got on really well and they then had to split up. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
yeah, agreed. And also, is if you get paired with someone that you don't like they obviously did, whereas in the real world and the dating world today, you can end it, but having to be forced to stay with that person a year. A year is not a short amount of time. It's not like a couple of weeks that you've got to put up with. And I think he described it as a prison sentence, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
He's constantly counting down until he can kind of leave.
It's interesting as well because I was thinking, and we now know why it puts them through relationships. I was thinking, why would it do that? I mean, the thing is, they were clearly meant for each other. So if it was real, why would it force them on? We now know why, because it was trying to see would they try to fight to be back with each other. It's
I,
kind of like Romeo and Juliet in a way,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I agree. I guess it's if you have a feeling of loss from something, maybe it makes you appreciate it a bit more. Maybe if they'd stayed together in the first relationship, they would have ended up taking each other for granted. But you get a glimmer of hope. It gets taken away. You get shown what bad relationships are, and it makes you appreciate that first one all over again, possibly.
The question I had as well, and like I've not used a dating app, but so you see them at the end and they're meeting up because that app has told them they're 99.8% successful. Does that force them into them thinking that they are compatible and trying to be? So even though the scenario, I guess what I'm trying to say, the computer has worked out 998 times they fight to be together. But in the real world, are they going to try too hard at the start because the app has said that they are a match rather than, I don't know. I guess their natural characters should come out and they should fall in love. But do you see what I'm saying? I guess.
Yeah, I guess you just don't know. Whatever modelling gets done by in anything, there's always a risk that it's not going to work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I just think yeah, I guess what I'm saying is because they haven't met and worked out that they like each other, they've been, like any app is saying, yep, that's a perfect match for you. So are they going in already? I guess what am I trying to say? They're going to try too hard, or they don't need to try too hard because they think, well, we are the perfect match, so I don't need to try too hard. I
I
don't.
guess it depends if they know what's gone behind working out that percentage score, doesn't it? Like, dating apps do give a percentage compatibility. God knows what it's based on, but they do give one. If their app actually tells you, oh, by the way, we did 1,000 simulations and of we've taken these biometrics, we've taken your DNA, we've cloned you, whatever, and we've tested you 998 times, and most of the time you came out on top. It does feel like a bit of pressure, doesn't it, if they kind of know all that information, because you don't want to break the
Yeah,
system.
yeah. And while you were saying that, the way you were saying it like that made me feel sorry for virtual Frank and Amy because I actually felt for them. Those are the
Yeah,
characters I felt for.
yeah, yeah. Because you're right. They weren't real at the end of the day, even though they had a
Yeah,
conscience and thought they were escaping.
yeah,
I said the other thing I don't quite get is when I really dig deep into this episode, is the only reason they were rebelling in the first place is because he broke her trust. If he hadn't broken her trust, they would have had a 5-year relationship and might have ended up like being okay. But it's only
yeah,
because he was deceitful and did something they agreed not to that all of a sudden they're rebelling. And
yeah.
why does rebelling mean a good thing as well? Why is that the positive outcome and not the algorithm matching them up at the end as the ultimate match?
Well, I think that's what it's saying. It's saying that in this computer generated algorithms or scenarios, it's keeping them apart. But even if when it was keeping them apart, they were fighting to be together. So I think that's why they're saying then they're perfect.
Yeah,
But and that's it. And I've read my note, and that'll teach me if I write a note to read it. This is what I was saying. I said it's ironic that the computer that they rebel 998 times, but it forces them together their real life versions. So their natural attitude in the computer simulation is to rebel against system, but it's forcing them to do something in the real world. I found that quite funny.
do you think actually what's happened is that someone has just created two characters on The Sims 1,000 times and just seen if they've got together and just kind of made a note of it and
Yeah,
what's happened? Maybe that's their compatibility, that they made a Frank and they made an Amy and they stuck them in The Sims just to see what happened.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In fact, we could do that. We could start our own dating app based on that. We could just play The Sims a lot.
If you saw what happened to the results when I play The Sims, yeah, you don't. Yeah, and I did make a note, and I've deleted it. There was because I didn't get it. It was quite late on when you start twigging that there is something not right, and it is before the final reveal. I think for me it was when she's skipping the stone and she says, I can only keep doing it 4 times. There's no more,
Yeah.
no less. And what was it when she said, we've got no memories beforehand? Did you kind of like how the episode went? Do you think how they then revealed it at the end? Because it was quite quick towards the end, wasn't it? It's not
Yeah.
something like we've seen before. Like if we take the last episode, it was Crocodile, wasn't it? You see the murder at the start, the technology, that recaller tech comes in early on.
I guess they
Here
had to
it's like right at the end.
I guess they had to spend a lot of time building the relationship between them, didn't they? And building the connection. And so I guess that was always going to take a lot of time. But you're right, the last 5 to 10 minutes did feel very rushed, where a lot happened without really, those, for example, those two characters finding out that they're part of a dating model, an algorithm, and part of a test. They could have done a lot on that about them discovering they were not real people, unless at that point they just deleted them and that's done.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh, actually, isn't it?
um, or maybe a bit of a, I don't know, because there's obviously 1,000 other stories. They could have done a little, not too much, obviously, but they could have done little clips of some of the other couples escaping in slightly different ways, and
I want to see the two versions that didn't rebel, who they ended up with, and were they
yeah,
happy?
yeah. Imagine if they ended up with those first two they had long term relationships with.
Yeah, and no, and actually, that's the other thing I want to say before I forget is that it's never said, is it? I wonder what would happen if, because they choose to look at the expiry date. So is it that if they don't look at the expiry date, they would have been together forever? That's the only thing I didn't quite pick up,
Yeah,
or maybe I missed.
because she said at the start, didn't she? Of a countdown started when we revealed, didn't she? So you are almost kind of got that impression as if they didn't look, the countdown would never start.
Right, right.
But I'm surprised that the coach, it's called the coach, isn't it? The coach didn't force them to start. Like that felt like it should have been a rule of the game, but they had to start it on that date.
Yeah, that you have to look at it, or even that you have to look at it at the start, because that's what I just couldn't work out is, yeah, what if they just didn't look? Was something going to force them apart? Maybe we could have seen that. Maybe that's what happened to the other two instances was that they
Yeah.
didn't look at it and they got. I don't know. That's the only thing that's been left in my mind about this episode is why. What would have happened if they didn't? What is it? Was there anything else about the episode? I mean, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell, really, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
it's
I guess
it's interesting.
going back to the option bit and what dating apps are like today. I do think this is a concept that could really work if you did it. I don't even know how you would do it. Not the whole you have to stay together 2 weeks, but if there was a dating app out there that only showed you four profiles, as an example,
Yeah.
um, I think there would be a lot more matches happening because I think with less choice, you actually then end up working on the connection rather than just skimming over
Okay.
it.
Okay. So let's take what you said then, and I don't know how this works, but we're going to copyright this. So this is the next couple of minutes is copyrighted and it's ours, right? It's the
Yeah,
Dan and Dan Casting Views app. What you could do is, in theory, is you could be on an app. You could pick the five people you like the most, or like the look of the most, and then let it run the simulations in the background and come back to you and say, right, of these five people, this is what we think. This is what happens to you with this person. This is what we think will happen, and then it ranks it in order of stability potentially.
yeah, I think so. Something like that. So, but I think there has to be an element of choice. So I think just say one day you get shown five profiles, and you have to choose one of those profiles. And meanwhile, the person is having to do the same thing. They get five profiles, and you're included in one of them. If you match, then you start working out what dating looks like and talking to each other. But you're kind of forced to have that connection for maybe you could time limit it, but you're forced to only be able to speak to that one person for a set amount of time in the hope that you build a connection, you build to talk to someone, and you end up going on a date. If it doesn't work, then you come back into the dating pool and then do your selection again.
Yeah, no, I like that. So if someone out there can help do this, yeah, no, I still think you pick five people and then it runs the simulations in the background
Yeah,
and then it comes to you. Because then imagine then you wouldn't feel bad if you imagine if you met someone or you picked someone and you had another two that you like the look of but didn't go for them and then they ended up going with someone else. So you might always regret and say, oh, why didn't I pick that person? But
yeah,
this one would automatically let you know, no, you don't have to worry about that person.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
And I think as well, like dating apps today where you can swipe right 200 times in a day, that doesn't really help with the whole choice thing and having too much to choose from. You can see that I've given this a lot of thought.
I do also think, now I got trying to put my head back in if I had to start dating again. How awkward I think I'd probably be. I mean, it is an awkward thing, really, isn't it? And this is taking
it
the awkwardness out of it in that sense.
it is weird, and I confess I've been on dating apps, and it is a weird world. But and I think why I like this episode actually, I find the concept of dating apps really interesting, and I would love to go behind the scenes and work, look at how it all works and how people get matched, and the numbers, how many successful matches, how many men are on there, how many women are on there. I'd find the whole thing really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it does interest me. So yeah, dating apps is something I think about quite a lot because I think they could be better. Um, but yeah, it's
Take
an
a leaf
interesting
out of
world.
Black Mirror's book then if you're listening to this and you own a dating app.
Yeah, if you want me to own your dating life, get in touch and I'll give you a set time and a person, and you can date that person for that long.
Yeah. Okay. The the episode, so I had a quick look around certain things. So the episode was inspired by Spotify by Brooker, as he considered a system which gives people playlists of relationships. And when you look
Mm.
at it now, you can absolutely see that's the inspiration now, isn't it? And the setting came from the production designer went to an expensive holiday, and where he went, or where they went, they used that as a basis for the hub world
Hmm.
in the show. According to exec producer Annabelle Jones, Hang the DJ reflects a state of dating in the present day and a general sense of loneliness. Yeah, and goes back to the inspiration. Charlie Brooker said, conceived the idea of the coach dating application with audio streaming platform Spotify. It determines a playlist for relationships that one should have before settling down with a partner. And I guess you could say in Frank's case that, yeah, he had the 12 hours, or yeah, it was 12 hours, sorry, wasn't it, with someone he absolutely adored, and then had the relationship where he wasn't happy. So he's kind of seen both ends of it, both sides of the coin there. I've got a couple of other things. One is the episode, and I think this is the only time it's had it, but it actually had a vinyl soundtrack release. So the the song at the end, the Smith song "Panic," where the name comes from, and also the Icelandic band Sigur Rós, they created a few tracks for it, and they released a vinyl soundtrack for this episode, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it
Now,
is.
the episode title, why it's called "Hang the DJ," so "Hang the DJ" is a lyric in the Smith song "Panic," and if I remember right, they wrote that because I think the story goes there was a horrible news story on the radio. This is Radio 1, so over here, especially sort of years ago, Radio 1 was like the main station. And straight after this horrible news story, they started playing like pop music. And Morrissey, the singer in the Smiths, was so annoyed at that he wrote a song kind of like rebelling against the radio station and Hang the DJ. And because they're rebelling against the platform, that's where the name came from. Now, you had something again about the Stones, didn't you? So did you just want to relay that?
So this is episode 4 of series 4, and it's at the point where she's skimming the stones. She suggests that she only does it 4 times. Now, I read this online. I haven't fact checked it, but it seems fairly reliable. But if you go to 44 minutes and 40 seconds, this is the part where Amy decides to chuck her coach into the water. She doesn't chuck it into the swimming pool. She skims it along the top. And on 44 minutes and 40 seconds, she goes, "Coach, count to 4." She then skims the stones, and by 44:44 is the fourth time it touches the water and sinks.
Brilliant. I wonder why why he's done that, but stuff like that is pretty cool, and I hadn't spotted that, yeah.
It is pretty cool, but also very very random. It's not linked to any other Black Mirror episode. It's not, the number 4 is just, the episode number and series number. It's just randomly inserted it in.
So we've got to check for series 5 episode. Oh, no, there isn't an episode 5 in series 5, I think. So I love people that actually spot things like that or work things like that out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's amazing. Would you like? I'm not even sure I'd even think to check things like that. It's
No. I only had one Easter egg for this, and so it says the dating app that appears at the twist at the very end was briefly seen in playtest, but it also pops up in USS Callister. I think it's the receptionist. She's on her phone in that. Apparently, she's on that dating app in that. So again, Prime Minister from the first episode doesn't feature in this one. Waldo doesn't feature in this one.
Waldo and the Prime Minister haven't featured for a while, have they? Like,
Yeah,
they need to make a comeback.
getting worried about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only Easter egg I found. So yeah, overall, what do you think then? What's your score for this?
So I feel like I have a top tier of Black Mirror episodes, and I think this comes into the top tier, despite the last few seconds ruining the story. I think this had the potential to be mid-9s, but I think I'm going to go 8.8.
Really? Okay. That's a good score. So just looking back, because Dan doesn't see the scores. I keep them. I've got a list here. That's the same score as Archangel and White Bear.
Spot on. I think I'm fairly consistent with my scoring.
I bounced around through this whole episode while we've been talking. I bounced around 2, and I went as low as 5. But you know what? I'm going to give it 6.
Okay.
I'm going to give it 6, and I think looking at it, that's our biggest discrepancy by the looks of it. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad score for a bad episode. I just loved the first. I think it's 51 minutes. The runtime. Let's have a look. What does this say? Yeah, this has got the runtime as 51 minutes, and I think for like 48 minutes, 49 minutes, it's a brilliant episode. But that ending it does spoil it for me. It does spoil it for me. I did enjoy it being a fun episode and not, like you said, not horrific or violent or distressing. So yeah. Any other comments on the episode?
Yeah, sorry, just one. As I said to you at the start, I wrote down 3 things for this episode. My notes were very, very basic. But one of the things I haven't actually talked about, but you mentioned it, so we kind of skipped over it, was the whole consenting to everything on an app.
Oh yes, yeah.
What a great idea that is. If there's a dating app out there that could find a way to make that work, I think, obviously the world is a nasty place sometimes with things like this, but that consenting to everything or what you consent to, I think would be brilliant if it was ever possible to do.
You're right. It's interesting because it was, again, I know I say this a lot, but it was a throwaway moment, wasn't it? It was about 10 seconds. He said, and I think you just see him tapping on that on his tablet, doesn't he?
But it's, like you said, it's a throwaway comment, but it's such a big topic in the world.
Yeah.
With things like this, and people being put in uncomfortable positions from people they meet online. So yeah, throwaway comment, but covers the whole world of nastiness. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. Maybe we can make that work on the Casting Reflections dating app.
Yeah, there we go. Copyright Casting Views. Yeah. I'm sure that's how it works. Next episode is going to be Series 4, Episode 5. It's going to be your one. It's called Metalhead. Before we go, I just want to shout out a few people. So I just want to shout out the group I've joined called the PodPack Collective, that just trying to help promote and support each other plus other podcasts. So it's Chat Tsunami, Nerdstalgic, Two Girls, One Reusable Cup, Review It Yourself, and Seismic Cinema. And yeah, see you next week for Season 4, Episode 5.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we've got, 'cause we need it. Don't make us get a spark and push.